Today, I want to talk about the redemptive quest and what it looks like to live a life of risk and adventure for the good of the world. Praxis partner for theology and culture, Andy Crouch, has provided a framework for us to think about what a flourishing life looks like. He says that as our capacity for meaningful action grows, so should our exposure to meaningful risk. This is the way to the good life. And if we're lucky, for most of us, our capacity for meaningful action does usually grow. Sometimes for us, that's a large event. Something changes in our life that makes us have a new capacity. But for many of us, this is something that happens in a compounding fashion over time. This is true for us as individuals, as families, certainly for organizations, and definitely for communities as well. As this happens, I want to propose that there's a big vocational question that we need to wrestle with. And it's actually a recurring vocational question. That is, should I de-risk or should I re-risk? Will I de-risk or will I re-risk? In this question, there's a bit of an idea that we either get used to one direction or the other. You see, the way we treat risk-taking actually becomes a habit in our lives. And it's really connected to three major things. Often we think first that it's a matter of risking our resources, our money. Maybe it's a salary to go on and start a new startup or something like that. But so often the resources are the easiest part. In fact, for many of us who've had success in our lives, comfort is the harder thing. We don't actually have to do something hard, so we just choose not to. Or perhaps for others of us, reputation is actually the big thing. Once we've established a certain resume and success in the world, our family and our friends approve of it. What if the next thing we do doesn't work out? Why take the risk that looks like we can't actually do these sorts of things over and over? Just like our inflection point in our vocation, we face these risk decisions at small points along the way, but also at large forks in the road. As author Stephen Pressfield says in writing to artists and authors, sometimes we apply this to our calling. He says sometimes when we're terrified of embracing our true calling, we'll pursue a shadow calling instead. The shadow career is a metaphor for our real career. Its shape is similar, its contours feel tantalizingly the same, but a shadow career entails no real risk. I don't know about you, but when I read this, I think I'm faced with pursuing a shadow career almost every week. There are choices I can make towards what I'm really supposed to do in the world, or choices I can make that make life easier and simpler. If we think about this mapped to a 2x2 on quests, which I borrowed here from an article called Choose Good Quests that Trey Stevens wrote, there's really 4 quadrants we can be a part of. Our work in the world is either a bad quest or a good quest, and it's easy or it's hard. And the pathway of de-risking, I would say, is a pathway towards easy quests that often aren't a great contribution of our lives to the world. But the path of re-risking takes us into better things and harder things, things that we can step up into. And this is critically important, not only for our own flourishing, but for the flourishing of the world. Listen to what Stephen says in that piece. Even among the talented who choose a path of building, most take safe and incremental bets. Such pursuits not only fail to push the world forward, but pose a cost and opportunity. There are important challenges facing humanity that no one is working on, including critical and even existential challenges. In other words, if you're an exceptionally capable person, a failure to pursue a good quest is not neutral. It constitutes a loss for humanity. As we think about this at Praxis and this idea of redemptive, which we define as creative restoration through sacrifice, the good, hard quest is the pursuit of the redemptive. You see, the more and more we're in pursuit of the good for the world, we're going to be involved in God's work of creative restoration, joining him in the renewal of all things. And as we choose to do that in a really profound and prophetic way in the culture, that's going to be harder. It's going to require sacrifice. It's going to move us up into this upper right corner of creative restoration through sacrifice. Now, some of you may hear this and think, he's talking about moonshots, big plans, huge endeavors, billions of dollars, 100-hour work weeks. And while that could be the case for some of you, and some projects seem to demand that of us. More likely than not, for most of us, we're getting involved in the work of lily pads, moving from one thing to the next and to the next in a particular direction with a particular vision. You see, I come to believe that trajectory is way more important than velocity most of the time. It's our ability to stay focused on what's really important and have a different perspective on how to get there. I love what psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi says, that the unifying similarity among geniuses and innovators is not cognitive or affective, but motivational. What is common among them is the unwillingness or inability to strive for goals that everyone else accepts. Now, what's exciting about this, I think, is he says you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to be the most charismatic person. You just have to stay committed to a different way of doing things. This is, I think, the pursuit of a good hard quest. Let me share a couple stories from the Praxis community of people who I think have done this work well. This is Greg Lutze, the co-founder of Visco. If you don't know Visco, they're a social network with over 200 million active users. They emerged out of photography culture and became a place where people would share their artistic contributions in the world. As you can see from the headline here, Greg was not satisfied with just creating another social media network, and nor were his co-founders. They wanted to create something that was better for the world than everything we'd heard about social so far. So instead of having likes and comments and ads all over their platform, they created a new business model. Yes, it had to come at some sacrifice. I think Greg and his co-founders left hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on the table, while others exploited their pathway to growth. But he has a different perspective on the mental health of our youth and has cared for them in a totally different way, in a way that values artistic expression and doesn't set up an online competition amongst those who are already amid trying to figure out their identity in their youth. Let me also introduce you to Jessica Kim, the co-founder and chair at IoniCare, a venture we had the privilege of walking alongside her to start. You see, Jessica, a serial tech entrepreneur, was going through one of the hardest times in her life. She was caregiving for her mom, who ultimately passed away. Her mom was in her home every day, where she was just seeing the difficulties of everything that she went through. This was her first time caregiving, and she was overwhelmed by the amazing amount of sheer paperwork, communication, and coordination it took to pull this off. Moreover, she didn't know anyone else who was going through this experience of caregiving, and in doing research, realized how alone the caregiver is. Almost universally, they end up suffering health consequences for doing the work of caregiving. Instead of saying, I don't want anything else to do with this now that this time of my life is over, she looked at the situation and said, maybe God has shown me this and equipped me in the way that he's equipped me so I can help others not go through the same pain I've experienced. She created IoniCare out of this vision, which means I am not alone care, providing community and technological resources for coordination around caregiving to make a very, very hard process a little less painful. If you look at these stories and many others I could tell you, I think you would find the characteristics of a redemptive quest. Let me tell you a few of them. First, they're truly consequential to the world. They're worth failing at. They have a cascading or catalytic effect and affect systems around them. A redemptive quest is focused on people or institutions at risk. They protect the vulnerable, broadly defined. They move the Overton window in culture. That is to say, they shift the possible. They often require a sustained, voluntary sacrifice and this repeated re-risking that we talked about, a real dying to self. They're often non-obvious from a market perspective and demand imagination. That's not to say they can't work in the market, but if they could already, there'd be 100 people doing them. They rely on a long-term vision and a long obedience in the same direction. They have a patient hope that we see modeled in the early church. And they are compelled by love, dispassionate about credit, understanding that if they're really going to go on this quest and it's really going to be accomplished, it's going to require many actors. And if you can't do a redemptive quest out of love, I would say you shouldn't do it at all. Now, at the same time, it's probably worth clarifying things that a quest aren't. There's a mischaracterizations, I think, that you could take away from this, thinking they're only aimed at scale and overvaluing the scope of something versus this countercultural demonstration. Or you might think it's about power as the pinnacle and a sort of conquest. It's not that. You might also think it's about fast impact, confusing the splash with actually a long arc of influence, which is how most things change. Redemptive quests are also not about venture structure. This is not about going from the business world to the nonprofit world or the social enterprise. In fact, the two examples I used were businesses using the markets to do this. It can be any of these things. This is also not a 10 talents mandate. That is to say, it's not driven by pressure to self-actualize on something, but instead it's a calling and an invitation, I think, that God offers us. Redemptive quests are also not about the heropreneur. Even though I told you 2 stories of individual founders, they would tell you it is the community around them, their co-founders, their team, the Praxis community, others who have helped them do this work. Redemptive quests also do not need to be about a new venture and a founder. Sometimes we can overvalue starting something new to simply joining a quest, and there are many good quests to join in the world. Last but not least, these are not something that we need to do for God. So often, we're at risk of prioritizing outcomes over intimacy with Christ and doing it with Him. We need to have a sacred pace that allows for our communion with the Lord in the work. As you think about these things, I might ask you to consider, are you on a redemptive quest? If so, what is it? The mere articulation of these things can be incredibly valuable for other people to know and understand and connect to. And if you're not on a redemptive quest, ask, what might it be that you're being invited into? Is there someone else's that you should join? Is there a reorientation of your life or organization that's possible? As you think about this, also, I would encourage you to ask a little bit of that compounding interest question. Is the difficulty level of your quest proportionate to your capacity for meaningful action? Or is the thing you're doing right now actually relatively easy? 5-10 years ago, it was very questy, very difficult. If that difficulty level does not correspond anymore, what would it mean for you to re-risk? Maybe through the enterprise you're a part of now or the role you're in. Or maybe in another way. As Elton Trueblood says, the major danger is not that we shall fail to appreciate past models, but that we shall lack the courage to be sufficiently bold in our creative dreaming. Whatever else may be the character of the redemptive society which the crisis of our time demands, it is at least clear that the society must make the habit of adventure central to its life. At Praxis, our redemptive quest is to awaken the church's creative and prophetic contribution on the major issues of our time. It's something that we hope each of you will be a part of as you hear this and process this and contribute your own quest to what the church does in the world. In this way, I hope you could lead an adventurous life yourself and that you might pursue a redemptive quest for the good of your own life, for the good of your family, and for the good of our world. Thanks for considering that.